everyone.
Welcome to the Trump Tyranny Tracker this Thursday, October the 23rd. We're just getting an update from Olga about her smoking cessation activities, as they were. Quitting smoking is what you would call it. And it's going well so far. This is day, 2 or 3? Or how far are we into this?
I started on Sunday, so whatever that is, and that's it. Hour by hour.
We're with you all the way, and good work getting it this far. There's so much news going on today, and we may even have Ellie Leonard to drop by in about 15 minutes as well to talk about Epstein. But there is so much Trump tyranny to be tracking. Have you just to start with the photos of the entire East Wing now completely demolished? They take your breath away. I mean, it certainly was not something that was telegraphed to anybody. I'd love to hear your thoughts, but this is incredible that they're doing that. And by the way, the bunker as well, that they've sort of announced that they're going to be redoing the bunker, which brings back all sorts of references to Hitler and other things. But how do you feel about what's going on right now with the demolition there?
I mean, as I said the other day, it's horrific. It's heartbreaking. It's horrific, and it's frankly symbolic of what's happening in America. I mean, he's breaking the White House down, and demolishing it literally, and this is exactly what he's doing, to America, whether it be domestically, whether it be constitutional rights, whether it be, foreign policy. It's heartbreaking. I mean, this is, I don't understand because I've actually had to deal with like landmark things prior in New York, and like you don't just have the right to just go wave a wand and like demolish a landmark thing. So I'm not sure how this was allowed.
It's
You
not. It's
know,
not a lie. It seems every agency or the commissions that are designed to protect this very thing from happening were not consulted. He just basically
did
unilaterally
it?
decided to do that. It's not even his property. Obviously, it's the people's
No,
property.
it's the
Uh,
people's house.
yeah, and for him to be doing something like this is just extraordinary. But then, as I just mentioned, that they are also going to be redoing the bunker. We're now hearing, which you pointed out the other day, that the ballroom was just on top of the bunker. And that does sort of harken back to the chancellery and Hitler's chancellery and the bunker underneath it. I mean, it seems like they're doing everything they can to follow the Third Reich's handbook here.
Yeah, and I mean, and again, he's a occupant of the White House, and it's one thing to change the furniture, the curtains. A few years ago, the first time around, Melania's hidden hands-made tail Christmas ornaments
Oh
in
yeah, I
the
remember that,
core.
and also the Jackie Kennedy Garden they just redid. They're now
They
removing
gutted
that
it,
as
yeah.
well.
Oh, yeah. Oh, I'm thinking of the other thing that the rose garden that they, threw
Oh, I
concrete
think the
on.
Rose Garden, isn't that the one that they're
Yeah.
redoing as well?
Well,
Because
they
they're
threw
just
concrete on everything. I mean, now it just
yeah, but I
looks
think they're
like,
now completely destroying it
oh,
for this because it's part of the East Wing. As far as I know, maybe I'm wrong on that one, but it certainly seems remarkable that they're treating this like one of his properties and not like a landmark that is, so important to all of us. The other big news today, of course, came from instituting Trump imposed sanctions on Russia's two largest oil companies, Rosneft and Lukoil, after canceling a planned summit with Putin. This obviously is something that we have all been suggesting needs to happen for a long time, but it's unusual. Why now, and whether there's anything else behind it? Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent called the measures unnecessary due to Putin's refusal to end this senseless war, though Trump said he hopes the sanctions won't be on for too long. What do you think is happening here?
I mean, it is the same thing that's been happening since January. I feel like a broken record repeating this over and over. Um, Trump goes, and sides with Russia. Then you have Europeans get into his ear and pull him back into their sphere. In this case, Ukrainians, were able to get him back, at least temporarily, and he, said that he was going to send tomahawks and whatnot. That was the beginning of last week. Then he has a call with Putin. Putin pulls him back into his sphere. Since the call, I mean, it's been remarkable because he had the call. He basically, again, had a very hostile meeting with Zelensky, especially from reporting that he was shouting and cursing on top of his lungs at Zelensky. Um, But then what's interesting is that over the weekend, Lavrov, the foreign minister, had a talk with Marco Rubio, because first they had to have a phone call to plan their meeting for this week, in order to plan the summit. And Lavrov, in good old Russian style, carried on with, insane demands. I mean, basically, the Ukraine should not exist, because it's the same demands that they continue putting, for since the full scale invasion, and frankly forever. I mean, they're um, Russia's whole, way of ending the war is for Ukrainians to surrender and submit and erase their heritage and language and culture, and just, and say we're a fake country. We are part of Russia, which it will never happen. Anyway, so the meeting between Rubio and Lavrov got canceled. And then whatever, again, you had Europe, whatever, was happened between Zelensky and Trump, alarmed the NATO Secretary General enough that, I mean, unlike after the Alaska summit, where you had all the European leaders, I mean, in August, dropping everything and within 48 hours arriving and knocking, at the White House door, here you had the same thing happen.
But it is amazing to have these sanctions are actually being implemented, and they're.
You know,
Sorry, you froze there. You may have missed that you hadn't stopped speaking there.
oh.
But I was going to just mention that these are these sanctions are real. They're there. I mean, it's going to hurt Russia. So unlike the previous instances where there was a lot of talk, these actually are real sanctions. Now, who knows what's driving it? I can't believe
Well,
Trump is not in Putin's orbit anymore. I doubt that. Of course, he's still following Putin's orders.
well, not in this case, because I mean, the sanctions on its own, I mean, they are going to take time to bite, although it seems like they are already beginning to bite,
Mm.
because India basically announced that right now,
And China.
you know, yeah, and China. But don't forget that Russia also sells a lot of oil, with no label, with no country origin. So they'll be able to evade the sanctions. I mean, the sanctions aren't as much. They're good. They're not, the game changer. What is interesting is a few hours before the sanctions were announced, that the U.S. took restrictions off of Ukraine using long range missiles to fire inside of Russia. Now, we per se haven't provided them with long range missiles, but Ukrainians, since they received the storm shadows from the UK, they weren't allowed to fire them inside of Russia. UK
Right.
would have given them permission, but the technology, the radar technology, is US technology. Biden said, no, we don't want to escalate. And that's it. So this is even more interesting, and even more interesting than that already a storm shadow was fired
Mm.
into Russia and hit an oil refinery. So,
What an unusual set of developments. I would never have imagined we'd see all of this happen, considering the latest talks, as you point out. Maybe Putin's had enough of the war. I don't know. It almost feels like
no, he hasn't. No,
no,
no, no, he
no.
hasn't. He's not going anywhere. I think Trump has had enough of, because look, he's supposed to have this summit, and this is exactly a repeat of August, which is, I wish Trump would stop calling and talking to Putin. But after the announcement of the summit, what did Russia do? They threw freaking missiles at a kindergarten. I mean, if you see the scenes of little kids, toddlers being evacuated, and like crying and screaming, and in Kharkiv, so this is, I mean, basically an FU to the United States. Like, yeah, we're going to have this summer, and at the same time, we're going to bomb a kindergarten. I mean, this is kind of not the best way to have a summit.
I guess what I'm saying is because there are just so much pressure on the military side, the Russians, and and maybe they are determined. Maybe they're looking for a way out and
No,
looking for a negotiation.
no,
This would be a kind of thing that they would use to
no.
push them into that, because otherwise they wouldn't have a reason, right? Don't they need a reason ultimately to convince
No,
everybody around them that they need to go into negotiations at some point?
They can't go into negotiations. Putin knows the history. I've discussed this also how many times.
I know you have.
Putin knows what happens with Soviet leaders who failed bloody conquest, what happened to tsars who failed the bloody conquest. I mean, if he fails reclaiming or initial, accomplishing his goals, he will be, either eliminated or removed, because the Russians, I mean, they don't stand up for their country committing genocide or anything, but they do see it as, their leader is weak, and they humiliate the Russian people, in this case, not achieving their goals. And that's it. And second of all, I told you, and, we've discussed this a million times, he can't end the war because it's on a war economy. The economy now is cracking. Even the war economy right now, footing is really, you still see the cracks breaking through to the point they can't deny to the public anymore. So, I mean, you need to know the Russian mentality. And as far as the military, are you kidding? The Russian mentality, the more millions that die for the mother country, the more, um, they admire. And
Honor, more honor, yeah.
even their, for instance, um, even people, dissidents who leave Russia, they could be gone for 30 years, 40 years. The Russian mentality and the way the Kremlin and how the Soviets always looked, that you're a traitor to your country and that you're property of the Russian government and the Russian, country. So, I mean, it's a complete, you cannot use a Western mentality to
Yeah.
analyze the situation, because Russians have something completely different in their head.
Well, let's move to the other big news of the day
Yeah.
as we get into the Trump Tyranny Tracker. Trump has pardoned CZ, the convicted founder of Binance, who pleaded guilty to money laundering violations. The pardon comes just months after Zhao, or CZ, backed the Trump family's World Liberty financial crypto venture. The move ends his U.S. criminal liability and could lift restrictions on Binance's return to the U.S. Market, despite the company's $4.3 billion money laundering fine. I mean, this guy was involved in basically failing to report a lot of suspicious activity, including terror activity and drug activity, and you name it, hacking, all sorts of things. And now he's been pardoned because he's got a deal with the president's son?
Pretty much. I'm shocked it took this long. I remember on the tracker we covered a few months ago when they joined. Not only did he, join this World Liberty Financial and is in parallel working with the Trump children, but you remember he come to or donate to the dinner? You remember that crypto dinner that
Yeah,
Trump
he did a
had?
big. Yep, that's right.
So I
He's a
mean,
It's hard to know where the corruption lines are, even it's hard to know where the conflict of interest lines exist anymore because there's so much
yeah,
of it. But clearly, this is a deal that Binance funded this World Liberty Financial, and the stable coin is all being run. The Trump stable coin is all being run on Binance, including the $2 billion that were financed through the UAE sovereign fund. It's all
yep,
being ultimately run on Binance. So the president's family is enriching itself while he's now released the founder of Binance. This is a really incredible story, especially considering the ties to terror organizations involved in the cryptocurrency transfers through Binance. Includes Al Qaeda, ISIS, and various other terror organizations, as well as all those ransomware things that have happened, plus drug trafficking. A lot of that stuff has been going through Binance exchanges, and the company failed to report these to the Treasury Department, which is why they got into all this trouble in the first place. Um, Next up in the Pentagon, Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth is consolidating control at the Pentagon through two simultaneous moves. First, he issued a memo requiring nearly all Pentagon communications with Congress to receive prior approval from his office, restricting even senior military leaders from independently briefing lawmakers. Secondly, the Pentagon introduced a next generation press corps dominated by pro-Trump and far-right outlets, including the Gateway Pundit, Lindell TV, and Turning Point USA. after mainstream media rejected the new restrictive access rules. This is a pretty big deal. You've got the New York Times and the CNN surrendering their credentials, and the Gateway pundits and Lindell TV replacing them.
I mean, I never thought this is like such a nightmare. I mean, really, this whole thing, everything that's happening. But here you have, headsets putting such ridiculous and insane restrictions on regular mainstream media, that and having them sign a pledge that they refused to sign I mean, they refused to sign the pledge, walked out, handed their press passes, and that's it. As a result, they are being replaced with, I mean, really extremist outlets. I mean, this isn't even Fox News didn't sign the pledge.
Yeah.
So this just tells you, you have One American News, which is funded by Russia, I'm sure. You have Gateway Pundit and these conspiracy sites. So, I mean, this is the beginnings of how agencies going to, you know, put out propaganda for people, and they have their set of journalists, their set of questions that will be distributed and whatnot. So you have this. This is extremely worrying, and this is anti-First Amendment. What is more concerning is the fact that the Pentagon put restrictions on anyone from the Pentagon speaking with Congress. Congress, one, funds. They're the ones who write out, or, do the budget for the Pentagon. And two, they are the check and balance on the Pentagon or any agency. And the fact that you have him saying basically that no one in the Pentagon is allowed to speak to Congress, I mean, it really has riled up Republicans. These spineless Republicans found, a piece of spine because they've all been coming out, and saying, well, not all, but several of them came out on both Senate and House side and said, yeah, good luck. We want to see how that works.
Well,
They're
do
not going
you,
to.
you
They're
know,
not gonna they're not gonna go for it. They're not gonna then what's gonna happen? The Pentagon's gonna be left with no budget.
the admiral resignation last week from Southcom, we found out a lot of the details from that through Republican congressmen on the Arms Committee, and that's how we found out what went on in terms of why
Hmm.
that admiral resigned. So this could be a reaction to that, but it's a pretty terrible one. Sorry, one second. But it's a ridiculous precedent. Of course, um, the one place that they could go were to the arms representatives in the Senate. They're sort of a trustworthy place for people to go and talk to. If these admirals and generals have no one to talk to, I also noted today that there's no judge advocate left at the and no JAGs left at the senior level of the military. So they have really very few places where they can go and talk about any concerns that they have going on. So it's a real crisis in the Pentagon right now.
Yeah, and all from a drunk TV host.
Yeah, unbelievable. We discussed the Lukoil story, and there was another one here, and I don't have it. Do you remember? I'm sorry, I just should have
There
had it.
was one that I had put in. I think it's really important for people to know because, it's one thing watching everything being dismantled around us, but we also have to keep sight of the human rights abuses that this country is committing right now. And this is going to affect every American because just like in Russia, or, I mean, anyone who looks at Russia and say, oh, war criminals, this is going to happen here in the United States. So besides, increased deaths in ICE custody. We're now well over 20 deaths this year. Under Biden in 4 years, there were 24 deaths. A lot of them in 2021, which had to do with COVID, but it's not normal to die in ICE detention center.
Mm.
So on top of this, on top of the stories of torture and how you call it, and sleep deprivation and everything else happening in these black sites. They're not even detention centers. They're black sites that no one has access to. Anytime Congress attempts to go visit it, they get arrested. On top of all of that, we have a growing problem that came up with ACLU, and that is that they basically are saying that women are having increasing miscarriages and
Mm.
literally bleeding out in ICE centers because they're not getting care, because they're being refused medical attention, because they have shackles put onto their stomach. And this is something, I mean, we literally, are now involved in what's happening with pregnant women. So this lawsuit revealed a lot of details, and we need to stand up, because you know what, these people can't stand up for themselves, and it is up to every person who has a heart, and who cares about rights, to stand
Yeah.
up and say, like, no more, this cannot happen.
It's so you're talking about a dozen women detained by ICE, described themselves as being shackled and denied medical use and suffering miscarriages. Wow, it is just unbelievably horrific conditions that they're being held in, and just appalling. Nothing this ICE is doing is endearing themselves to anybody. This is really a terrible tragedy. Well, uh, Ali, I'd like you to meet Olga, because you guys have never met each other.
Okay.
So I'm sure
Hi.
Olga Lautman meets Ellie
Very nice
Leonard,
to meet you.
and
Hi, nice to meet you.
I
Ellie's going to
apologize.
fill
I'm
us.
sitting in my car. I'm at soccer practice, so the
Oh my
lighting isn't
gosh.
amazing, but there you go.
You should stay with the soccer practice. It sounds more interesting than what we're going to talk about, which is Jeffrey Epstein. But thank you very much for interrupting your for the practice you're doing today. And Olga, is there anything else that you want to talk about or promote for Trump Tyranny Tracker that's coming up in the next few days for you at Trump Tyranny Tracker?
Um, you ask me every day, and this week, I
You'd be
can't put
focusing on not
my.
smoking.
That's my focus, not smoking. I did write an article, for anyone interested, about Netherlands cutting intelligence sharing, with the U.S. cutting back on it. But right now, this week, I'm kind of like, trying to stay afloat.
I
Um,
understand.
and that's it. But I'll get there. And then on Monday, Julie and I released the latest episode of our active measures series. So for anyone who didn't read it, check it out. It's about the Russia's Trump Tower dangle and
Oh,
everything
that was a
that
good one.
happened.
That's a really good one. I read that. That was really great. And of course, it's one of the great stories of the 2016 election interference by the Russians. So that's at unmaskingrussia.substack.com. And you can also catch Olga's work at trumptyrannytracker.substack.com, which is where we derive a lot of our stories for on the Trump Tyranny Tracker, which we do Tuesdays and Thursdays right here at 7 p.m. So thanks, Olga. Nice to see you again. And we'll see you
Very
again on
nice to meet
Tuesday.
you.
And good luck
Bye.
with your
Nice
rest
to
of
meet
your
you.
good
Yeah,
with your non-smoking.
I know, hour
Yeah.
by hour.
So that's the way
Yeah.
to do it. Bye, Olga.
Have a
Oh,
great show, both of you guys.
thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
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 Ellie, I'm just dying to get you back on because I know you've been reading the book by Virginia Giuffre, which I understand is a harrowing read. At the best of descriptions of it, it just seems like a very difficult life that this woman led. But I was so struck by your reporting about her father, Sky Roberts, and what she reveals in this book about Sky Roberts, which is so um, just shocking. Really, I had not heard any of the stuff before. So, can you tell us a little bit more about what she says in this book?
Yeah, and I think from my point of view and the things that I've written about and being a mom of, four little kids, I don't think I was as shocked by that revelation. I think I already knew it. It had just not been said out loud. When you have somebody who's homeless at 13 years old, and you have someone who's being trafficked for the first time at around 13, 14 years old, and you have somebody who feels safe with an older man, when you have somebody whose father drops her off at an older man's house and says, I'll pick you up, maybe tomorrow, whenever. Like there was a lot of red flags there that her home life wasn't safe. Like I think of my parents and um, what they wouldn't have ever allowed me to do, and that's pretty much everything on the list.
Yeah.
Um, so what she did talk about, so she's not had any kind of a relationship with her father, and when she went public, I think it was in 2021, he started doing interviews. He was on Piers Morgan, and he schmoozed. It was all this stuff about how she was protecting him by not telling him all of this stuff. And when it turns out that, my gut instinct, and I'm sure a lot of people's gut instincts were right, that she was originally abused by her father. Like her father very much groomed her, very like violently abused her. and then traded her off to his friends. They would trade their children with him and his friends. And then by the time Epstein came along, her father, who's Sky Roberts Sr., because her brother is also Sky Roberts,
Mm.
he got her a job at Mar-a-Lago. He introduced her to Donald Trump. She was pretty immediately, you know, recruited by Ghislaine Maxwell, started working for Epstein, kind of your traditional story. And he was at the house. He was at Epstein's house when some of this stuff was going on and
Which is
claims never to have
shocking.
seen it. Right. He claims never to have seen anything, which is just kind of a ridiculous statement. And and so now there's revelations from her, and she said she can't prove it, but she's positive he was being paid by Epstein because all of a sudden he was buying boats and kind of these extravagant things that were not in his income range, and all of
Wow.
a sudden they had stuff. And so she said she was pretty sure he was being paid by Epstein.
Wow, that is such a dramatic revelation. And to think the suffering that she went through in her life, and and even to the very end, because as we've now learned, her marriage to I don't remember the guy's name was also
Robbie
abusive.
Dupre, yeah.
Yeah. So she's gone through this endless abuse, and she seems to everywhere she turned around, there was someone um, who was going to abuse her. And even the way she writes about all the rapes that she's experienced, this was, she
Mhm.
compares one rape to the other rape as if one has so many of them that that's all you know.
Yeah. She because it started so young, she was basically rewired, right? She talks about having a relatively happy childhood until she was about 7, and then something happened that just like turned her mom off like a light switch. And my guess is some kind of an addiction was involved there. I don't She didn't specify, but like her mom just all of a sudden became less attentive, neglectful, and then her dad kind of stepped in and some of this stuff started happening. And when you start that young and it's so frequent, you're basically rewiring someone's, synapses and what they expect out of life and what they don't run away from, right? Like if something like that were to happen to any one of us now for the first time, whether or not it happened, we would still be wired to want to do fight, flight, or freeze. She was not wired to do that. She didn't do any of those things. She just was learned to take it basically, and she it was a long time.
I was speaking to Tara Palmieri earlier on the Five Stack, and she was able to join us for 20 minutes. And it was interesting. I asked the question about whether at any point in her experiences with Virginia Giuffre, that did Virginia understand that she was being blackmailed that she was being used to blackmail these people in order to catch them doing, statutory rape, to catch them doing crimes. That was what the blackmail entailed. It was why they went after these young women and these underage girls, because they knew that videotape of someone with a woman is not going to get them necessarily what they needed. They needed something that would be so damning for the politician or their business leader that they were blackmailing, that they'd be almost certain to get the result they wanted, which is why, at 17, Virginia Giuffre was introduced to the prince.
Mhm.
And I got the sense from Tara that she didn't know that she didn't necessarily understand
She
the
w-
context of that.
yeah, she was very innocent. There's a lot. If you listen to Ghislaine Maxwell's interviews with Todd Blanche, there's so much blame on Virginia Giuffre for seducing or stealing or doing this, that, and the other. And I just she tries to say that it's because in England the age of consent is 16. And it's like I don't care. I don't really care that that's the age of consent in England. She was a child, right? She's a child. And so
Traveling around the world, being introduced to people for the sake of entrapping them in a crime, and to be used in blackmail is not excusable by the age of consent, I don't
right,
think.
right. And then just kind of these revelations of he had secret rooms in his house. Like there's either a massive amount of stuff that the FBI has, or there's a massive amount that I don't think they got. They glossed over that they eventually packed up. I don't know if they still have it, but they packed up and it became a part of his estate. And one of those is the boxes and boxes and boxes of videotapes from all the pinhole cameras that he had all over his house. And the other thing is he had a secret room. And she said that in his massage room, he goes, "Come here, come see this. There's a secret door." Open the door, and it was floor to ceiling photographs all over the walls without a single, inch between them, and then boxes and boxes and boxes more. And they were all underage, victims. All that is somewhere. He paid off. Another thing she said was the Palm Beach Police Department basically worked for him. And they were the ones who were doing a lot of the investigation originally. It's likely that they were the ones who tipped them off before the FBI did their raid because all their hard drives had been removed. So there's just she just talks about all this corruption that happened on the level of like law enforcement, politicians. I mean, she names a lot of names. She talks about the prime minister, who was probably I'm not all the way done with the book, but that's definitely the darkest and most violent portion of the story is the prime minister. I assume she's talking about Ehud Barak, but I don't know. She didn't name it. She just said a prime minister, but he was one who was very frequently on the flight logs, very frequently at Epstein's house. But just weird things like Matt Groening from The Simpsons was writing and getting his feet massaged, like all these people that you don't expect to be there. I mean, I'm having qualms about Bill Gates. I'm starting to think that he was more a part of this than I thought he was.
I think there's evidence towards that. Yeah. Look, I mean, the difficulty with all this whole story is that we keep pointing out is that it's not just about the girls and it's not just about the blackmail. It's about the other corruption that was going on. And this was an intelligence operation that was designed to compromise people, designed to, make money for people, designed to do all sorts of things that would be otherwise criminal. And the blackmail and the underage human trafficking, that was all part of the protection to protect people from finding out about the real crimes. So you've got, you got layer on layer of criminal activity here that is so important for everyone to really understand that this has now taken over the American government. I mean, this is the same enterprise has grown and grown and grown to the point now that it's, I want to say, inhabiting the White House, but is also destroying the part of the White House. I mean, that's where we sort of literally destroying it. And this is where we're, this is not just a story about Virginia Giuffre. This is a story about what's happening to America and the corruption of America.
If you think, I was just thinking about this today. So several years ago when the Weinstein story broke, I was working as a subcontractor for the New York Times. So I was typing up all these interviews. And at that time, the New York Times fought to take down Harvey Weinstein and expose him. They fought for it. It was everywhere. It was top of the news. That's the difference when money is not involved, right? When it's just a sex ring.
There's no blackmail involved.
There's no blackmail involved. Now you have now you have Epstein, and you have people like Trump and Gates and Ehud Barak and all the people who worked at Harvard, like all the people that are on that list.
Jamie Dimon. I've been writing about Jamie Dimon, who's been this revered banker by everybody, and he obviously knew what was going on for 15 years as his bank was providing the funding for a blackmail and human trafficking operation. I mean, it's just
the New York Times is silent.
Yeah, and there's more and more and more and more of this all the way through. Yeah. Ellie, thank you so much for stepping outside of your soccer practice there. And I really wanted to chat to you about this. I'm sure we'll talk again about all sorts of things, including Epstein. But thank you so much for joining me tonight, just to catch our viewers up and your viewers up with all of that. And we'll see you again soon. And everyone should find you, of course, at the... I always get this wrong because I never. I
know it's just a mouthful. I need to change it.
The Panicked Unpaid Writer is where you can find Ellie, or you can just find her at Ellie Leonard on Substack. Always very, very interesting writing and well written, and you'll find lots of great detailed nuance about Epstein and many other things on her Substack. So definitely subscribe and also give her a paid subscription if you can. And that is no problem. Have a great rest of your practice, and I hope everything goes well for you and whoever's there with you. And that is the story tonight. Cheers, everybody, and thank you for being here, Ellie. I'll try to keep doing these things at 7 p.m. Monday to Thursdays, at least. and get you as many of the new Substack voices as we can to share their work and their writing with you. And I'll be back tomorrow at 3 p.m. with the 5-Stack and Dean's live from the wedding. His wedding. He's going to someone's wedding, and he'll be live 5-stacking from a wedding tomorrow at 5 p.m. So I hope 3 p.m. I hope you'll join me then. Thanks for being here tonight, and have a great night, everybody.